Hello, boys and girls. I want to welcome you to our science lesson. Now, I want us to start looking at types of grazing. Types of grazing, or what we call the methods of grazing the animals. Now, we have three major methods of grazing. We have three major methods of grazing. Number one is called rotational grazing. Number one is called rotational grazing. Then method number two is called zero grazing. Method number two is called zero grazing, or what we call stall feeding. It is also known as stall feeding. Then number three, we have what we call herding. We have what we call herding. I want us to start with the first method of grazing, that is rotational grazing. Rotational grazing. Now, rotational grazing has three types. Rotational grazing has three types. We have what we call strip grazing, paddocking, and tethering. Now we shall be discussing each of these three types of rotational grazing. But right now, I want us to look at the characteristics of rotational grazing. The characteristics of rotational grazing. Number one, the pasture land is divided into units. So if a farmer has land that he or she has grown pasture, he or she subdivides that land into small portions, into small units. Then the animals are allowed to feed on a part of the pasture for a period of time. So, because the pasture land has units, the animals do not feed in all the parts at once. But the animals will feed on the first part. Then when the grass is finished or the pasture is finished, they are moved to the next unit so that they can feed on that particular unit to give room for this unit, to give room for the other unit to regenerate. So that is how rotational grazing is. And lastly, the animals are moved to the next part of the pasture to allow regeneration of the other part, the other pasture. Just like I've already said, that when the animal is fed to a particular, the animals are allowed to feed on a particular unit. They are moved from that particular unit when the grass is finished to the next unit. And the cycle continues like that. That's why it is called rotational grazing. So it is done in sequencing from one unit to another unit. In our next lesson, we shall be discussing about the methods of rotational grazing, starting with strip grazing. Thank you, and let us meet in our next lesson.